Hello and welcome to our latest Cardiff Blues virtual Q&A. Great to welcome the guys here with us tonight. We've obviously got Rees, who heads up our academy, John Mulvihill, our head coach, and Nigel Walker, who you all know well, recently joined our board as an advisor, but plays a key role in kind of the development of sports stars in his day job with the English National Institute of Sport. We've also got Duane Goodfield, who's going to be joining us. He's got a few connection problems at the moment, but he'll be jumping in as well. And I'm sure you'll all agree Duane's doing a great job with our set piece this year, particularly the scrum and also the breakdown area, which he looks after. So thanks for joining us, gents. Great to have so many people. I think we've almost got 100 viewing already, so great to have so many of you joining us, but we'll get straight into the questions. We've had a good load of questions submitted already, guys, so we'll fly straight into them. And the first one, John, is it's for you, and it was around, this is a kind of simplified version of the question, but it's self-explanatory there. What are the main steps we need to become a more consistent side to finish in those playoff places?
We had a meeting on that this afternoon, and I think Nigel was in our meeting as well, about how we need to be consistent in probably game management is a big thing for us, to play at the right end of the field for longer periods of time. And then, as you found last night, we limited the area, the mistakes we made. We limited the turnovers that we gave. We played the ball at the right end of the pitch and then stuck to our game plan. So that was a bit of consistency going forward. We need to stick to. It's a bit hard sometimes with a lot of changes and players being pulled out at the last minute, but we're expecting big things of our younger players coming through. So we just got to keep working with them to make sure that they can adapt to the game plan we're playing.
And Nigel, from your experience, what are the key kind of things you found at the English Institute of Sport which leads to that consistent performance?
Well, John's just touched on those things. Knowing the game that you want to play, or knowing what you want to achieve if it's an Olympic and Paralympic sport. When you want to get there, so in Olympic and Paralympic sport, it tends to be over 4 years. And then breaking it down, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, where do we need to be in 6 months' time? And John and the coaches are working flat out. As John just said, we've just spent 2 hours together talking about what we want to achieve. We're depleted at the moment for good reason, because we've got so many players in the Welsh squad and we've got a few injuries as well. But it's a great opportunity for young players to come into the team and to see how it should be done, to gain that experience and be able to use that experience in the months and years to come. This is not a linear thing. We're not going to start winning 20 games a year straight away. It's going to take time for the ideas that the coaches are trying to embed in the players, and then we'll win perhaps 2 or 3 more games than we won last season. And then we'll start challenging for trophies, and then hopefully we'll become dominant. And that's how this thing works. And I've got absolute confidence that we will get there, and in an acceptable period of time as far as supporters are concerned.
Great stuff. John, there was a follow-up question there, which was around you personally, what your ideal style of play is, and if you had the player, the squad you ideally wanted, would our game plan kind of change?
I think we saw our ideal game plan when we played POW here in the Challenge Cup last year. I think we scored 8 tries that night. Really used the ball and move the ball with intent. We got over the gain line, which is a big key. We struggle to sometimes because of the profile of our team, but it's a team that can play different styles. I think sometimes we're a little bit stuck on a ball movement game, whereas you play against bigger teams like Leinster and Munster, who can really wear you down and get over the gain line and use their bigger bodies. So we're getting better at carrying the ball and mauling teams as we did last night. We need to be a bit of a complete team and not a one-trick pony, really. So because you can get closed down quite quickly. So I'd like for us, for 1 to 15, to be able to have the ability to use the ball. We need to always understand the go forward support, continuity, pressure game. And in some areas, we can put pressure with teams by the way we kick, the field position we play in, how we defend, and we put big teams under big pressure from that. So I would like to see that our game plan will evolve with time to be able to play different styles of rugby. At the moment, we're probably more a dangerous passing team. I'd like us to develop a real carrying mentality going forward, so we have different styles that we can play against different teams.
Brilliant. The next question, it stems from some comments made by your former teammate, Nigel, Jiffy on Scrum 5, I guess. Question whether in Wales we produce enough creative players, and do our academy structures have the right structure to kind of create the right balance between creativity and technical skills? So we've run out of characters to have the whole question there, but for you, Griff, and then perhaps Nigel, do we have the right balance? And what's the process, I guess, for producing those players?
Yeah, I think it's a slight generalization, but I think it's a fair question. And I look back at being a former national skills coach, a regional skills coach around that 2005 period onwards, and it was clear, I think, for a long time that a lot of power-based stuff was coming to the game, and rightly so, but everything existed in silos. And I think that's probably caught up with coaching in some ways now. So something I'm passionate about in terms of our group, when I came into the role, is having really talented, skilled coaches who can deliver the game we want to see on the field, but also just don't, again, deliver in isolation. We work closely with our academy conditioners so that every individual player is challenged to be the best they can be. And I think certainly that I think we're trying to produce players who, from a backline point of view, can run, pass and kick. And as John has alluded to, players who can ball play, but also having the balance as well of where the S&C programs can complement some of our carrying ability as well.
Okay, that's great. And one for you now, John. Since making the move here to Wales, obviously in your third season, how much have you had to change your coaching philosophy to adapt to the style of play and also the way the game is refereed?
I think the philosophy hasn't changed very much. We still want to be able to team that attack on both sides of the ball. I did spend 5 years playing and coaching in Ireland and 9 seasons in Japan, and the weather sometimes in winter's not that great either. But I know over here we've got a real focus on clearing our lines, making sure we're good in our exits, and I think that's probably some of the basics in Northern Hemisphere rugby, where when you do get a really wet, windy night in Connacht, you need to be able to grind out a win. And I've found that's not so much a philosophy, but it's about how we need to get better in our ball carrying ability, probably our close contact forward play to complement what we've got as a back line. And it's a work in progress, but I think Duane will attest to it as well. We've, in some of those areas, those key areas, we've improved a big time this season. And the refereeing, you get 5 different nationalities refereeing. So we do a lot of work with Rod Manning, our head of analysis, on what the referees' preferences are in a game, what their pet hates are, what their likes are, how they referee the breakdown. And we meet with referees weekly, but sometimes they're a little bit inconsistent on how they rule a game. But referees don't miss tackles, and referees don't kick the ball out in the fall, and referees don't throw bad passes or drop the ball. So it comes down to us owning our areas of the game and not really dependent on what style of referee or how good or bad the referee is on a game night.
Yeah, and just coming to that, the beginning of your answer there, where you're talking about coaching philosophy and style and so forth, you must have been delighted with the way the boys performed on Monday night. Given what's happened in the previous weeks where they perhaps didn't manage the conditions, it was a massive leap forward. And Jamie Hill, Jared did a great job there.
Yeah, I think our game manager was excellent. I think as a team, as a whole, we've asked them to really front up physically, which they did. But one of our big keys that let us down the week before is I think we had 22 turnovers, and I think we had about 15 or 16 penalties. Well, you're never going to win the game if you give the opposition that much opportunity. I think we only had nine penalties and under 10 turnovers in that game, so which had allowed us to play at the right end of the pitch. Our line-out drive was completely dominant, and we could really set a platform on the back of our set piece. So there was some within 1 week, and that's the frustration we talked about as coaches today. we could be so poor in one week but so good the next, about how we get a little bit of balance and consistency through our working week to make sure we get that at game time.
Great stuff. Next question is for you, Nigel. So it's from a support we know quite well, Rob Hill. It's a simplified version of the question here, but it was basically around the philosophy with us at the moment is we need to develop players from within. We're putting a lot of investment and time into the academy to bring through players, which is the right way to go. But when we've been successful in the past, we've also had a core of overseas players who are available week in, week out. And the question is this still part of the plan, strategic plan going forward? And are we in the market basically to kind of strengthen the squad? So maybe if you kick us off on that, Nigel, and then we come to John.
Yeah. The point I was trying to make, and I think, Rob, I think you said the person who's asked the question, is I was asked about the importance of the academy. And of course, our academy is really important. I think 45 of the 47 players of the squad are Welsh qualified. I think it's something like 22 players have graduated from the academy to the Blues team in the last 6 years. We've got a good record of producing our own, and we need to continue to produce our own and make the most of the natural resources that are available to us. But of course, it's a balance. And of course, we'll have overseas players. I'm not going to put a figure on it, but we will have some overseas players. I was just simply seeking to bring a note of realism to the conversation. We're not going to have 8 players earning £350,000 or £400,000 a year, whatever the top rate is in the market these days. We're going to need to supplement our academy players with 2 or 3 players in the team who are from overseas, and we may have a number of overseas players in the squad, but the balance is going to be predominantly of homegrown players, and we need to make sure that alignment from academy to Cardiff Rugby Club as it currently stands through to the Blues region is as good as it possibly can be.
Yeah, and John, you probably know more than anyone here. Obviously, finances dictate, how you strengthen the squad and if you can bring new blood in, and whether that's overseas. But I'm sure you wouldn't turn down a couple of key players, and perhaps someone like Ray Lilo shows what someone from another country who's available. I know he's injured right now, but is generally available week in, week out. A massive asset to the squad.
Yeah, I think Ray and Dimitri are excellent examples of 2 overseas players really buying into the culture at the Cardiff Blues. Ray's been here for quite a while. Dimitri was at the Ospreys for 5 or 6 years previous to that, so he's not a new overseas player. We're not about, and I don't want to have 7 or 8 or 9 or 13 overseas players like some of the clubs in Wales do. It's not sustainable. It doesn't build strength and depth. It doesn't go anywhere near trying to help represent what the academy is trying to do and what grassroots rugby in our region is trying to do as well. I could have got a big number 6 last year, but then Shane Lewis Hughes wouldn't have played for Wales. We could get a 7 who's a overseas player, but then Jim Botham misses out in his pathway as well. So it's about finances, but I think even if we had a bigger budget, we wouldn't be going out spending on every foreign player available. Yes, it would help having a couple more when our international players are away. We didn't struggle so much last year because we had about 6 or 7 in the Welsh squad. We've got 12 players unavailable for selection because they're in the Welsh squad now. So we're picking 2 boys making their debuts in the pack this week on the back of them coming through academy, but us not having the money to have overseas players, I suppose, within our group. So there's a balance between the two, but we're never going to be a club that's going to go over the top.
Great stuff. I know, obviously, you'll see Duane has just joined us. I know he's having a couple of connection issues. Duane, can you hear me okay now? I take that's a no. We'll let Duane carry battling the technical demons and come back to him shortly then. The next 2 questions were around kind of the disruptions with COVID and how are we giving our young players game time. So there's been a couple of questions around this, and I guess it's two parts to this. So if you answer it first, John, I know we've got a few A games lined up for the future in the next month or two. And there's a concern, if you are playing these A games at the moment, we're going to see more of our fringe players come in, which is great from your point of view. But from Gruff's point of view, how are we ensuring those younger guys, maybe the guys 18s, just maybe coming out of that age group, how are we going to give them game time also? So, John, do you want to kick us off on getting that balance right?
Yeah, I think it might be best if I follow Gruff, because he's got some pretty strong views on this type of thing and how we're working as a group to get these guys game time, and then I'll come in after that, Gruff.
Yeah, fine. And I think what is important to say is quite an interesting sort of dynamic that I think traditionally in Wales we're quite competitions led, and I don't think that's perhaps given us a window which we've actually had over the last 6 months to be proper development led. So I will say we've made some real strides, I think, on skill development, physical development, and as per the previous question, just complementing the two. But clearly we have to play, and the challenges within the calendar, and a little bit, I think, sometimes a lack of governance in terms of where we'd like some direction. But we have taken on a decision to put together a bit of an A programme for the rest of the season. There'll be a couple more games in December, and we'd like to follow that through to the end of the season, because it is imperative around some of the young players mixing, as the game against the Dragons showed the other week. Having Ben Thomas into the mix, but alongside Mason Grady, Ellis Bevan, is that it does give that sort of progression which you need at the end of the working week, because again, it's fringe players, like you've said, who need a bit of rugby, but then the balance between the guys with 18, 19, making that judgment on, do they need to be involved in the group? Do we keep the development focus, or actually the benefits of being in this group really become tangible to the senior group in a shorter period of time? So we're wrestling through that, and it has been a real challenge, but we've got a structure in place for that. I'm delighted as well that we've got 16s and 18s doing stuff around the region now, which we couldn't do before. And so I'd like to get to a point by the end of the year that 17s, 18s, we have a month of fixtures in March and April, so we can actually add talent ID also.
And before John follows on, I guess the one thing to point out when it comes to kind of the younger players or fringe players, if you like, within the senior squads, they're already getting exposed because the number of injuries we've got and the number of boys with Wales. You've got to look at Teddy making his debut, Jamie Hill making his first start the other day. A lot of these guys, by the nature of the game at the moment, they're already in there.
They are, and I think we should celebrate that, and I think that's part of our pathway. We shouldn't be just bound by the numbers and just tick boxes, but they're quality people who I think by and large deserve the opportunity. I think the good, robust debate that I enjoy having with Mulvers and the coaching team is actually there is a good talent pool, 18, 19. Often we ask the question, well, should they play next week? But actually, sometimes my job is to say, actually, I think for the next 6, 12 weeks, we've got plan A for this player, and I don't want to deviate. So sometimes that can be challenged because we do get a bit stretched, but it becomes good, healthy development debates then. And I think the individual is at the heart of that, which is something we're proud of.
I think also it was very difficult early on with COVID, all the protocols and the cost of testing that we've had to go through. So the senior group, we've gone through 11 weeks of negative tests at a huge cost. But we also had to start in groups of 7, and then you return to. Then we had groups for 3 weeks, and we had groups of 10s and 15s and 30s. So that takes time. And unfortunately for the academy boys, they weren't being tested because they weren't coming into big groups. They stayed in groups of 7 for an extended period of time. I know it was very difficult to just do closed skill for them. So when now we're into with probably we brought more of the academy boys in through our testing process just to make sure that they can actually play for the senior team. But a byproduct of that is we've actually got a core group of players now who can play A rugby, and there'll be others that will come in that will get their opportunities who are only 18 and 19 to play that level. So it hasn't just been as easy for Gruff to ring the Ospreys and say, let's get a game on. There's so many things that have had to be taken into consideration for us to get there. Further complicating that, there's another game probably that will be hopefully cross-border game in December, but it's also the same week where we have European games, and if we can't get 30 on 30 in that week, well, then we probably can't have that A fixture because they'll need preparation to it as well. So between myself and Griff and the coaches, we are balancing up what is best for development and what is best for the Cardiff Blues as well to make sure we get the right price on the pitch.
Great stuff. So from what I understand, Duane can hear everyone but me, which is perhaps a blessing for him. So, John, if you could lend a hand and just read the question for Duane's benefit. You're dodging the bullet here on refereeing, and you can hand it over to Duane.
I know that you've had frustrations with the refereeing of the set piece over the last couple of weeks, and just to be fair, Duane has sent a lot of clips for learning for referees into Greg Garner, and a lot of them have come out in a forum that they use to get better. Just give the supporters a little bit of feedback about your frustrations and where you think we have improved in areas and where we also still need to improve.
Yeah, so first of all, on the process, we do get a chance for feedback, both sides. The Ulster game comes to mind straight away. So that we had, unfortunately, we had 15 scrums on our 5 metre line. So it was Ulster ball. And 4 of them, after feedback and going through the right process with the officials, were actually the wrong decisions. We should have gained penalties. And then obviously that gives us field position and territory. So you can imagine the frustration around that, and you guys as supporters watching it as well will probably see that. But we do go through a professional process. It is frustrating sometimes, particularly when those decisions go against you from one, the performance angle, but secondly, the one obviously it's the most is they can add to the result. But we continue to be professional, keep going through the same processes, although it is challenging at times when they do sometimes continue or double bank from game to game. But all we can do is focus on ourselves, to give feedback, which I know they do. So Greg Garner, the head of referees, does appreciate it. You speak to the top referees; they do appreciate it as well. So we just try and keep our relationship as close as we can, and as professional as we can, although at times challenging.
Great stuff. Coming on to the next question, one for you, Griff. Let me just find it. Where I've lost it now. It was about colleges and our relationship. Are we starting to see the benefits of kind of those relationships you started with colleges across the border, such as your Millfields, Cliftons, where we've seen players kind of the well-publicised stories of players kind of going over there and then going into a Bristol, Gloucester, Bath kind of system. Are you seeing the benefits of those kind of link-ups yet? But also, do you want to kind of just give a bit of a overview of the relationships we've got with the kind of A-licensed programs here? And also, I was with you this morning. We were meeting some of the guys from Brecon College, the relationship we've now got there as well.
Yeah, and I think that is the important starting point, is how much we do value the 4 schools and A licenses on our doorstep. And you can only look, as I said, and celebrate for Glantarf. Teddy Williams getting his Pro 14 debut Monday night is a massive thing for them. You got Owen Lane, who's a star for Whitchurch High School, crossing the whitewash. Likewise, Ben Thomas was Cardiff and the Vale captain. Jamie Hill, and Gavin Smith, landmark games on Monday, products of Coleg Cymoedd. So the numbers that Nigel referenced earlier, that's testimony to the work we do alongside our schools and colleges within the region. And we've got a strategy in place that we want to expand that educationally as well. But clearly as well, we felt that looking at how the world was changing a bit, and looking at players and parents looking at different opportunities, having links with Hartpury and Clifton is pretty beneficial. I think we're starting to have some great conversations. I'm up in Hartpury every month, spending time with Wayne Thompson and his team. And there's a host of Welsh players there, not just from the Cardiff region, but across the border, really, just a whole host of them that we've got to keep some certain amount of eyes on, because we don't get everything right at 16, and I think we've got to be open-minded about that. But I think the best example probably currently is Emmanuel Faywood Wazobo's gone to Clifton College, and we've worked really closely with them over the last couple of years. In the summer, he trained with the senior group, and I know he made a mark there. And we're working through his A-levels this year in the year 13 to hopefully link up with Cardiff University next year. But in amongst that as well is his development plan, which we coordinate jointly with Clifton. And he's someone we'll see probably in the next wave of A games also. So there's something clear and tangible coming from that. And I think for us, it just builds on what is so good around this region, but actually consolidates some real individual opportunities as well.
Great stuff. Let me just unmute John for the next question. John, bit of a funny one here from Tony Aposti, who I think you probably know. Do you feel you're cursed given the kind of the difficulties you've had each year in pre-season, essentially, with the fallout of the kind of political stuff last year, and even more so this year, the COVID problems that have hit everyone?
100%. No, it's look, it just comes with the game. We're a lot better we're further down the track where we are with our player development and our squad depth at the moment. But obviously, Project Reset was tough for us. We lost Rees Carey for it ended up being 6 months to Saracens, but he came back to us because obviously he wanted to play for Wales. He'd actually played for Wales from our program, but he went to a World Cup after that and played a bit for Sarries and came back. And then obviously that was really tough on not just coaches, but I think really tough on players when we couldn't tell our players up until April or May that they actually had a job come June. So I think it was tough for everyone, and obviously tough for the Scarlets and the Ospreys, who looked at that merger that was stopped at the 11th hour. So I think it was tough for everyone, and I think we did pretty well in my first year, like just hanging in there as a group. I think then we started last year, and I think we started to hit some form. And then obviously COVID, we had a pretty nice run in. We had probably 5 of the 6 games at home that you think are pretty winnable to finish off our season, which would have given us, I think, European Heineken's Cup a place there. So we would have finished in the top 4, which would have been excellent for us. But unfortunately for us, and the world has happened. But you just got to roll with it and have a bit of forward thinking and just be positive about the whole thing, that we will have a good run of games, hopefully coming up very soon. And we got a really bright future of the Blues. As I said, when I started, we had maybe 4 or 5 boys in the Welsh squad, and in 2 years, we've probably released about 25 players, but we've brought in quality players, not as many, but quality players into our program. And you see the fruition where young guys get opportunity because they're not blocked by maybe older players who are on their way out. And we've now got 12 in this current squad that are training for the Autumn's Cup. So it is when you do really well in selection, it does stress us at the other end. But fortunately, we've got a really good academy program, and Griff's now been in that hot seat for a couple of seasons now as well, and we're starting to see the benefits of him and his team and the guys that are working with him, getting some younger talent coming through. Not ideal to go through it, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be a lot stronger for it.
Brilliant. And Nigel, next question is for yourself. Basically, how are you putting into place your experiences from your own career in elite sports, both as a player, I guess, and as an athlete, but also your day job today? And maybe John and Duane or Griff might want to follow up on kind of the help you're giving them at the moment and influence you might be having with the boys.
When you go to the other guys, I'll put my hands over my ears just in case there's anything really negative. I'm just looking to support and to ask questions about the things we do, why we do them in the ways that we do, and whether we could get any small percentage gains if we did them in a slightly different way. There's no rocket science to any of this. Our coaches, the same as coaches in other regions, in other clubs, are working flat out. Our players are working flat out. So therefore, we need to talk about, you talked about skill and creativity earlier. Are we skillful enough? Are we brave enough? Do we understand the way that we want to play the game? And John alluded to the conversation we had earlier. John's coaches and myself and Dickie Holland, the chief executive, were just talking about the way things have gone this season. What have we learned? What could we do better? Just standard things, and making sure that everything we do as a region, as a club, is excellence is rooted through it. We do it to the best of our ability, and we understand the journey that we're on. Just asking those questions. And I've had a couple of conversations with Griff, and perhaps you go to Griff next time. I just asked him about the academy, or what's the purpose of academy, which might seem like a really fundamental question. Are we trying to have 20 players every season? Are we looking for 5 outside halves? Are we just getting the best players that are available? Just simple questions like that to make sure that it makes sense all the way through everything we do.
That's great. Do you want to follow on from there then, Griff?
Yeah, definitely. No, Nigel has come in and I think has questioned in the right way, and understands the process, I think, in terms of the challenges we have, and certainly grasps the region as it is. But I think the questions you've asked has probably put me on the spot. And as truth be told, I'm very clear on the purpose of the academy, and I have from day one. And I think I'd like to think the sort of players have understood that, the guys who've come into the pathway and what's expected of them of a day in, day out basis. But truthfully, if you perhaps asked the man on the street or perhaps the people above me, we might say different things. And certainly the partnerships we have, as we've said, are really productive. But it's probably challenged me to perhaps share the vision and purpose that we have, with more people who are invested as partners, so we can get a bit more engagement and alignment. And I think that's probably been some real critical learnings, which Nigel has prompted really effectively for me just over the last month or so, really.
Yeah, and just following on from something Nigel mentioned there, do you have a target in terms of bring through X amount of academy players each year? And another point, about potentially a fly half. Are there certain positions where in the depth chart, John might think he needs a young fly half coming through? Would you then invest more time in a player in that particular position, or is it kind of the players that come through in the positions, the best guys there and unrelated to position?
No, it's a bit of both. I mean, principally, I look at the talent initially and the breadth of talent in the region, but then there is a clear correlation to the succession plan. And myself, Mulvers and Dickie, speak regularly on that. It's almost a monthly, get together around where we're at, and that can be an ever-changing, moving feast, really. So that's really important. And where I probably came into the role, I felt there were lots of gaps within that succession plan, and we've probably been creative, and we've worked with the Exiles and 1 or 2 of the educational establishments to make sure we've plugged that. But obviously, then we want to just generate more of a constant stream of the talent that does come through. So that's important, but it is part of our, the mission and values is around, the sustainability and development from within. For me, not just hiding behind it, but I wouldn't put numbers on it. I'm proud of the numbers and stats that we can currently put out. I just don't want the numbers to become ticking a box exercise.
Yeah.
I aspire to be, world class in our production of elite athletes.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And John, next question. It's similar to one we had earlier. I think it was from Peter Ellison, actually, which is around, the kind of common thing that gets thrown around that we're coaching the kind of natural flair, individuality and skills out of players. But I guess when you look at the Cardiff Blues squad and, some of the young players there, let's say, for instance, Jared, Thomas, you certainly couldn't kind of attribute that to us, the players who are coming through of us. But do you just want to talk about that kind of misconception, perhaps?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't happen here. I think that sort of that statement sort of come out of years ago, where you'd play really structured rugby. You'd go 3 phases to the left and come back 1 phase to the right, and so on. And each number of players had to be at the right ruck, and you can only kick in certain parts of the field, and so on. We don't have a real tight framework of how we play the game here. We might structure to 1 or 2 phases, but then it's about what they see in front of them and how they play. So we would do a lot of simulation training. We'd do a lot of scenario-based training, where we sometimes train with 2 yellow cards or 1 yellow card, and say that we haven't had the ball for 5 minutes. How are we going to attack? What are we going to do? Where's the space going to be? So we would also do lot of drills with numbers over or numbers under, and let the players learn through that experience. But I'm not here to overcoach Thomas Williams. I'm not here to overcoach Jared Evans. I'm here, and the coaches are with me to help in their experience of other parts of the game that they mightn't be as good at, to help those. We want them to keep their super strength, but help them in areas that they're probably not so good at, and give them a little bit of direction in that way. But definitely we want players who can just go out and play. And that's some of our best games have come when we've given them very, very few instructions. I think the half time against Connacht, when we beat them by 20 odd, bonus point win, I just said them at half time, I want two things, and that's physicality and effort. That was it. So we didn't tell them what end of the field they had to play at, what plays they had to run. Our boys know what they're doing, and we can help them when they lose their way.
Okay. The next question actually is probably more in relation to myself than any of you guys, so I'll try and answer this very quickly. It was around the concerns with Premier Sports. I know there was some issues last week, and what are we doing to kind of deliver additional services on a match day? So problems such as last week, they always get flagged to Pro 14, who then in hand flag it to Premier Sports. There was some sort of feed problem last week. I don't think there's ever kind of problems quite as severe as we saw from that Edinburgh game. It was a rare game that I didn't attend myself, my colleagues did, and I was meant to be working from home, and I had the exact same problems, couldn't see a thing until about 35 minutes. So that
just
all got...
just to come in on that as well, like I'm not going to bag Premier Rugby, and we shouldn't be bagging him on that night. We were in the grandstand in the box.
Yeah.
We could not see the game. So if we couldn't see the game, obviously the TV coverage, it wasn't going to be any good. We had to spend the last 30 minutes on the sideline, and from the sideline you could see to the middle of the pitch only. And unfortunately for us, or fortunately, because we didn't play that well, a lot of the gamers on the other side of the pitch, and we didn't get to see it. When the ball was kicked, it was like, where's Wally? Where's this ball going to come down? So it was pretty tough conditions there. So I wouldn't be bagging Premier.
There were some streaming issues, and I think as soon as it got resolved, that fog had descended in, so we might have been better off if it didn't work. And in terms of the additional service, I don't know if you've seen, but we're doing a match day live at all home games at Rodney Parade at the moment. Obviously, with the rights situation, we don't own the rights to be able to show any of the match ourselves, so we're trying to offer a bit of kind of radio commentary, which has a bit more kind of colour and light-hearted banter and insight from players, board members. Dickie's dropped in, coaches have dropped in, so we are trying things, but we're obviously limited in terms of rights. But getting back to the rugby and development theme, I think someone's just asking here, Griff, about a bit of an overview and how exactly the pathway works from top to bottom. There's been another question that comes on which you might want to address here, which was what your plan is this season to identify players for the kind of regional age grade when the Dewar Shield kind of competition and that age group are unlikely to play this season. So if you want to consider that in this general answer.
Yes, it's a potential huge void taking place, and I have been worried over the last couple of months in particular about how we've got to fill that void, because it is a certain amount of players that we don't know enough about, truth be told. I think part of the strategy is that we've got to be better probably in getting earlier alignment with our 15s group. That's the one that comes from separate schools, entities coming through and have done successful job in terms of perhaps playing numbers, but we've got to get better alignment in terms of provision there, which will give us probably earlier eyes on the talent pool that's there and some of the individual development plans to complement that. But then for us, the process does tend to begin at 16s north and south, identifying squads and selecting that with our volunteer coaches and network of professional staff. And in a traditional year, seeing those guys come through that sort of inter-regional games, combined teams coming together, normally gives us good eyes on to identify any players potentially who could be academy contracted. We've done 7 over the last couple of years, and we've gone earlier than in previous years because we're seeing the talent, and we want to invest in it earlier, get that better level of support rather than waiting to 18 plus, where potentially there's obviously the dangers. Dangers is the wrong word, but the opportunities to go elsewhere. And obviously we're still quite adamant that we want people on our doorstep that we can give the right level of support and provision to. But through the 18s, then we do see some of the changes, and different people from some of the A license programs take place. And we work closely with them around all the IDPs for every player. So we're always on the go, coming through that 16s process with perhaps 90 to 100 players that we're trying to monitor and support. And we've done that from probably an area where we're a little bit under-resourced, although thankfully the Blues and Dick in particular are supporting a talent pathway manager, which for us to get more of an impact and to align the 15 to 18s group is going to be huge. I came into the role eyes wide open, job title academy manager, but the fact was I was probably spending 20% of my time with academy, 80% with age grades, and now we've managed to flip that round, and I think it's going to be for the betterment, for the players coming through that we identify, but those then that we can actually get a little bit more specific as well, with our alignment to Cardiff RFC, and again just where we've had perhaps concerns with the 18 to 20, 21-year-olds in terms of where the calendar and perhaps opportunities are or are not, as the case may be. I think we can perhaps make more of a consistent difference coming from 15 to 21. Does that make sense? That was a bit of a long-winded answer.
No, that's great. And the one thing you probably didn't touch on, I know the senior coaching squad and yourself work obviously you're very closely working together, but they're very open to having those kind of youngsters coming into the senior environment when through pre-season or when we might be short in a certain area. And perhaps 2 good examples: Emmanuel kind of trained with them through the pre-season, Mason Grady trained through the pre-season and made such an impact. He's been given a senior contract on the back of it, and is in that senior squad already at what is he, 18, 19 years old.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's tangible examples. I think I've seen as a coach before, Welsh rugby, where you've got your peer influence, let alone the quality coaching. You look at someone like Mason picking up snippets of quality detail from someone like Ray Lilo. Go back to that sort of point we made earlier in terms of squad composition. That is so valuable for the players. I know Jared Evans, working closely, someone like Luke Scully or Ben Bennell just beneath that as well. There's some real sort of key mentor sort of systems we can put in place to help that, alongside understanding how to be a pro. I think that's often the challenge of coming from the age grade and where we've got some systems and procedures in place, but it's about understanding the routines of the pro game also.
Great stuff. And back to you, John. We've got a question here from, well, it doesn't actually say who this one's from, but it was around the injuries we have in the back row, in particular at flanker. Do we have any kind of plans to recruit, or are you going to kind of bring in youngsters? I think there's probably been, from what I understand, a bit of good news around Ollie, perhaps not as bad as it initially looked.
Yeah, Ollie should be a few weeks. I think Boydie goes in surgery in the next couple of days, and he won't be too far away. We'll probably get Jim and Shane back after the autumn series, but Griff's running a really good program. One of those players that he talked about training with the senior squad, back rower, he'll make his debut at Pro 14 this year based on what he did in an A game, what he does at training, and how he's fronted up. And we've got a couple other guys coming through that are homegrown. So I don't think we need to push any panic buttons yet on where the players come from, because we've got them here in our region.
So that's Gwilym Bradley, is it?
Yeah, so Gwilym will make his Pro 14 debut this week.
Great stuff. So how does that actually work, Griff? Someone like Gwilym, he came in through the Exiles program, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I mean, I was working closely with Gareth Davis, the Exiles, when I came in, and we've got a large database there, so it's trying to align that database with guys who could be Wales 18s, Wales 19s, Wales 20s, but then who could be on Cardiff University's radar, and trying to bring that together. And like I said, for someone like Gwilym, we were going into an A program as well, probably 18 months ago, trying to plan that out properly. Was about getting a bit more depth, and despite having some top quality sevens in the senior squad, we felt there was probably one of those examples of a slight gap in the system. So Gwilym was probably someone that, you know, we got to know through discussions. He played Wales 19s, and Gethin Jenkins happened to be coaching that group at the time. Started to tell me how coachable this player was, how durable, how good over the ball. So some of the stuff that fits our DNA, and was starting to add up in my mind. So then you look at it around, you know, academy recruitment, what we haven't got, and it started to become a fit that got him into our A team. Played for the RFC as well also, and has changed actually from university to full-time pro at the moment, which suits him perhaps this year, and is something we'll monitor.
Yeah, and you mentioned university there, having kind of 3 major universities within kind of the city of Cardiff and outside. It's massive bonus for us. I
think so, yeah. I know some clubs will work just on, you know, sort of linear alignment with one institution, and that can certainly work, I think, in many cases. But for us, I was adamant from day one with the 4A licensed schools and colleges, 3 universities. It's a spider's web, but it gives us a bit more diversity, you know, probably a little bit of creativity, point of difference, a different cultural points around these establishments, and tapping into people who are perhaps different as well.
Great stuff. Nigel, coming back to you, we've got a question that came in from Dan Pierce, I believe. It is similar to one of the ones we had earlier, but I think he's talking more about the kind of technology side of your job, and, you know, part of your role is innovation. So I guess it'd be nice to kind of hear from you on a kind of more general basis on how much of a kind of difference that innovation and technology makes in your day-to-day job, and whether rugby could learn some lessons from that.
The short answer is that there are always things to learn from other sports, other countries, about a whole raft of things. The performance innovation arm of the English Institute of Sport works primarily with what we call the sitting down sports. So your rowing, your canoeings, your cyclings, skeleton, where there's an object that you're involved in, and the way that object goes through the wind, through the air, through the water. We work aerodynamic helmets and suits and that sort of thing. So we team up with companies and universities to give us that competitive advantage or to solve solutions. So that sort of work, when you look at innovation in that way, would not work for rugby. But there are ways of doing things differently. And crikey, I've been involved in and around the Blues over the last few months, and the game has developed enormously since I was playing. There's no two ways about it. When I started playing, because I trained as a full-time athlete, I was a little bit stronger for pound, a little bit faster than the guys I was playing with, and that gave me a huge advantage. If I went to play now, that advantage would have disappeared. But there are always problems within sport, and how you apply the mind to come up with novel solutions to meet those problems or overcome those issues, just in the way that you think, and to think differently about problems and the approach to the game. I think there are things that we can do in that area. I'm not going to go into detail now, but I think we can improve in that area, and we'll be working flat out, as the coaches have been all season and the season before, to make Cardiff Blues, Cardiff Rugby Club and the Academy the best in Wales. If you group that as Cardiff Rugby, the best in Wales, and to challenge to be the best in Europe.
Brilliant. I'm sure everyone would love that to happen, Nigel. So we're basically 50 minutes now. We've had a few questions coming in live, which we'll just go through quickly. I think most of them we've addressed, but there's one that's come up a couple of times, which is around, would we benefit from having a season-long A-League? And I know there's a bit of debate around that, whether it's been at the moment or a few months ago before COVID, but whether the answer is an A-League or kind of investing more and putting more resource into the Welsh Premiership. So it's probably one for all three of you, I'm sure, if I have opinions on this. So, Gruff, do you want to kick us off from that development point of view?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the A-League, and I enjoyed some of the fixtures around the Irish sides in particular are quite valuable. When you look at the 2 years ago, the team list that played Leinster the way would include people like Shane Lewis Hughes, Jim Botham, Ben Thomas. but logistically they can be quite hard and challenging. And again, trying to be consistent around the calendar there, because the Premiership can be a useful tool as well. I think it's had its frustrations for me over the last couple of years developmentally, but I think if utilised in the right way, for the SDA and some of the Premiership sort of work we're doing around Cardiff could be one and the same. I just think we need a little bit of governance where the fixtures and calendar can take us. But I think as long as we've got our ducks in a row in terms of the way we see it, and in terms of the players themselves and how they progress, I'm comfortable either way.
Great stuff. Nigel, John, anything to add to that yourselves?
I just think we struggled early on with our depth and numbers, particularly when the Premiership played at the same weekend. So clearly there wasn't an alignment between the Celtic League, Pro 14, and our Premiership clubs. That's something that was disappointing, because there were boys who missed out representing a Blues A program because they had to play for Ponty or Merthyr or Cardiff. So they missed selection, and they missed an opportunity to step into rugby at a high level. I think, remember the first game we watched, there's a handful of those Irish Leinster A-team players that are now on the front row, played us last week. So, they've used it as a real development tool. We missed the trick on that one, I think.
Great stuff. As you see, Duane's popped back up. He's been having a shocker with technology this evening, but he's come back in. We have got a couple of questions for him, which we skipped over earlier, but one has come in live, which you're probably best to answer, Duane. It's on Shane Lewis Hughes, and someone that very well. I think he was he first came into the age grade setup when you were in the age grade coach. So just want to talk about his journey, and then the impact that his kind of mentality and work ethic is having on the wider squad at the moment.
Yeah, he's certainly a blessing, and he's been in the media recently that he's very similar to an Alan Wynne-Jones, first to arrive at everything, last to leave. But yeah, he does rub off on the rest of the group. He's very unique, and it's actually extremely valuable to us. Because the boys now do follow him, and I think with his success, which he is rightly having with Wales at the moment, as an individual, will only be good for Wales, but also us when he comes back to the Blues, because no doubt he'll go up another few notches as well. So yeah, he does rub off on others in more ways than one. But yeah, great character and the work ethic, as the question is asked. Yeah, he does have a big impact on our squad.
Yeah, and the other question I was referring to earlier around the front row forwards. At Cardiff Blues, we got a huge amount of very, very young prop forwards in particular who have massive potential. And the question was around how do you get the balance right of exposing them at the right time and developing them, but also kind of protecting them. I think there's no point hiding from it. It's probably based around. Carey coming off at halftime, just ahead of halftime last week. So, how do you get that balance right when you got such young props who clearly have a massive future, but it's such a tricky one to get right?
Yeah, it is. It is difficult. We believe at the Blues we set the boys up to succeed, and how we do that, and he's managing with the players around him, and the group of youngsters we've got at the moment are in a good place, but you must remember that they probably had their first spells with the likes of Gethin Jenkins, Matthew Rees, Fau Felice, who not long ago have recently retired. So they would have had some good experience there. Rees is no doubt he's an international rugby player. Unfortunately, the last few weekends he's had a tough time, which he's well aware of. I spoke to him in the week. But he will learn a lot from it as well. From within the Blues, competition is big, and we and the players know if they perform consistently, not just on the field but off the field as well, then that's where they get a selection for us. And the consistency of performance in training will allow them greater opportunity to get selection on match day. And as you know, Rees's first 2 games just were on the bench. You know he's gone into the international squad and started those games. That's the decision that obviously the national squad have made.
Yeah, and he's on the bench because Corey Domachowski has been playing and training so well, and you must be delighted with his progress, and to have 2 loosehead props there, local boys with massive potential, and already performing at such a high level is just brilliant for us.
Yeah, you look at the 4 looseheads, even including the veteran Rees Gill, they all came through the Blues Academy, and the competition is great. Brad Fires, also probably the most professional forward we got. He's unbelievably professional. Doesn't leave anything unturned. And the competition is big. So them 2 looseheads have names in papers at the moment, but they're also getting pushed very hard from the boys within the squad who are competing every week for places.
Yeah, and just following on from that, Duane, this question from Robert Hill, that's on the screen, is probably most fitting for you to answer. But around the massive improvements in set piece this season, I know the scrum was very good last year, but that's continued. But also the line-out, we've seen a massive improvement, and I think it was typified last on Monday. Teddy Williams came on, debut Pro 14, his first touch of the ball Pro 14 was nicking a line out off the opposition. So how much of that is down to the talent coming through and experience, or kind of changes in coaching that you guys have made in the summer and pre-season?
There's definitely been a narrower focus on from a coaching's perspective, so being real streamlined in what we want the boys to achieve, going back to the basic fundamentals of the game. And as we know, the stronger your set piece, the stronger platform you have to play, and obviously the stronger your defence becomes. And he's right, Robbie, right in the question regarding the players are getting more experience, and the only way they do that is by on the field. But probably the biggest changes we've, which I refer back to, is the level of competition we have within the group in each position. So you talk about loose heads, we've already discussed that. Our hooker is extremely competitive position, and we know the talent we've got on the tighter as well. All different players with different strengths, but the competition is getting greater. If competition is great, as Nigel will know, your performance levels go up. And from a coach perspective, it keeps us on check and keeps us focused to making sure that we keep driving the standards as high as possible.
Brilliant. So it's just coming up to 8 o'clock. We said we'd do an hour, so we'll just finish with 2 quick questions. John, if you can answer this very briefly. I know you're already kind of looking and talking to players, not necessarily signing anyone, but certainly in the market. Do you just want to touch on that going into next season?
Yeah, I think we've also got to get the balance. We've got a really good young crop of players coming through. I think over the next 3 or 4 weeks, you'll see probably 4 or 5 debutants, but we need to obviously balance that with bringing in some quality, either Welsh internationals or foreigners next season, to give us a balance within our budget and for the betterment of the team, really. So I think it's a bit of a balancing act. We wouldn't want to bring in foreign tight head props because we got some good Welsh ones. So we need to look, when we look at recruitment of foreigners, on areas where we're not, we don't have the depth or we don't have the firepower. Certainly a lot of the young ones coming through are excellent, and you do need to focus on that because that's the core bread and butter of our business. There's over 70% of our players that play each week are homegrown talent, and that's what we're really proud of. So we're not going to over-recruit international forwards or backs to take their places, because once they're given an opportunity, like both of them and Shane Lewis Hughes, they take it with 2 hands.
We'll just finish with a bit of a fun one. We've got about 30 seconds left. Nigel, question here from Robert Phillips. Who would win in a race between yourself and Josh Adams? Let's talk you back in your prime, 1996, coming into the Cardiff RFC team and that great season we had. So who do you fancy to win that? You're muted. You've done this on purpose. You're muted.
Sorry, schoolboy error. I thought you were going to talk about now. You need a calendar for me and a stopwatch for him. Let's just say we're never going to see each other race. But I never, ever lined up against anybody who I thought was faster than me.
Great.
Leave it at that.
No, it's been really good to have you on, gents. And I know the supporters are really valuing these sessions. We do try and do as much as we can during these testing times to kind of keep supporters as informed and as engaged as they can with life at Cardiff Blues and Cardiff Arms Park. So thanks to you guys for joining us on the panel this evening, but also all the viewers. So I'll let you get to your dinners now. I know you're all been working late tonight and probably desperate to have something to eat. So thanks for taking the time, and for all the viewers, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.